One of the most popular fighters to step inside of the octagon is Stockton's own Nate Diaz. Before all of the fame and glory, Diaz grew up in a violent and poor neighborhood. Despite the everyday problems that Diaz had to deal with, the reason the California native got into the MMA was all due to his older brother, Nate Diaz, who became another popular UFC fighter as time moved on. At the age of 13, Diaz finally started training in jiu-jitsu, though he wasn't particularly good at the beginning. Of course, no man or woman is naturally gifted at doing jiu-jitsu from the beginning, but Nate's journey wasn't as easy as other fighters. However, no matter how many times he would lose inside of the gym, Nate never gave up and he eventually got his first combat sports belt in jiu-jitsu. Fast forward to October 21st, 2004, and Nate Diaz is competing for his first professional MMA fight after years of training. Diaz made his debut for World Extreme Cage Fighting, which housed future UFC stars such as Chael Sonnen, Chris Lieben, Anthony Pettis, Jose Aldo, Uriah Faber, and his brother Nick Diaz. Nate's debut was a success as he beat Alejandro Garcia via submission. Coming off his successful lightweight debut, the Stockton native tried his hand at the welterweight division. However, Nate was met with his first professional loss at the hands of Koji Oishi. Despite his loss, Nate continued fighting and made his debut as a lightweight for Strikeforce, with Diaz bouncing back quickly with a first-round TKO over Tony Juarez. Nate would continue fighting for several promotions, with his biggest accolade being that he won the inaugural WC Lightweight Championship in his hometown of Stockton, California. In 2007, Nate ended up being one of the contestants for the latest season of The Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter had spawned talents such as former UFC middleweight champion Michael Bisping, Michael Chiasso, former women's UFC strawweight champion Carla Esparza, former UFC light heavyweight champion Rashad Evans, Tony Ferguson, Kelvin Gastelum, and former UFC light heavyweight champion Forrest Griffin. The true question is, would Nate Diaz join these men and women as one of the winners of the annual show? It didn't take long for Diaz to answer that question, as the lightweight beat Rob Emerson, Corey Hill, and Gray Maynard in short order via submission. When it was all said and done, Manvel Gambarian was knocked out cold, and Nate Diaz was celebrating his new six-figure deal with the UFC. Of course, just winning the Ultimate Fighter doesn't guarantee a long career in the UFC. Luckily, Diaz held up his end of the bargain thanks to his electric performance against Junior Assunção, Alvin Robinson, Kurt Pellegrino, and Josh Neer. Coming up, Diaz was to take on the toughest test in the UFC to date, Clay Guida. So exactly how is Diaz training for Guida and his other competitors? If you said smoking a joint and slapping random fools, then you're close, but not quite there. In terms of training, Diaz didn't do anything overly complicated or fancy, with basic exercises such as sparring, lifting weights, and takedown defenses. In terms of diet, Diaz has been on a vegan diet since the age of 18. The Stockton native credits the transition to vegetarian meals as his main success in competing at the top level. While the exact contents of what Nate eats isn't known just yet, he does follow a raw vegan diet, though if Nate isn't training, then he'll eat eggs and fish every now and then. In terms of Clay Guida, he's another fan favorite who has previously won the Strikeforce Lightweight Championship. At this point, Guida was a veteran of the game, beating top-ranked fighters in Strikeforce, Extreme Cage Combat, and World Extreme Cage Fighting, in addition to the fighters he's dropped in the UFC thus far. When you fight Clay Guida, every athlete should prepare for war against a veteran, and that's what happened between the two lightweights at UFC 94. Unfortunately for Diaz, Guida came out the last man standing in a very close battle. The same thing could be said about his next fight against Joe Stevenson, with both athletes producing another banger, but Diaz ultimately falling short. For the next several years, Nate would continue to deliver thrilling fights inside of the octagon and beat several big names such as Donald Cerrone, Gray Maynard, and Jim Miller. Following his bout against Maynard, Diaz asked for his release from the UFC on social media. Dana White refused, and the lightweight opted to stay out of the octagon for a while. It was eventually revealed that Diaz was unhappy with his pay and sought to fight somewhere else for more money. A year later, Diaz would finally accept a fight against former UFC lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos, and boy did that fight go badly for the UFC star. First, Diaz came into the bout overweight and was outclassed by the former UFC lightweight champion. Following that bout, Diaz returned to the octagon another year later, but in better condition than his fight against Rafael dos Anjos. He and Michael Johnson had an exciting fight. However, when it comes to that bout, most remember it because of the profanity-laced call-out from Nate Diaz to Conor McGregor. McGregor was originally set to fight Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 196, but the former UFC lightweight champion suffered an injury, forcing him off the pay-per-view card. With only 11 days to prepare, Nate Diaz had the biggest fight of his career. During this time, Conor McGregor was undefeated with the UFC and was holding a featherweight title. As you can imagine, the odds were highly stacked against Nate Diaz going in. However, the Stockton-raised kid couldn't care less about odds and stats and went into the bout and gave it his all. Once again, Diaz produced another banger of a fight. However, the UFC star shocked the entire MMA community by beating McGregor with a second-round submission. This skyrocketed Nate Diaz's popularity. McGregor and Diaz would have a much-anticipated rematch at UFC 202, and just like their first encounter, this was a back-and-forth war that certainly lived up to the fans' expectations. The former UFC lightweight and featherweight champion emerged victorious that night. However, Diaz still came out the winner as the bout boasted his stock and, more importantly, his wallet. Let's hope that these two stop trash-talking and give the fans one more match before retirement. Following that bout, Diaz stayed out of the cage for 3 years. The UFC star never stated that he was retired. However, Nate explained during an interview with ESPN that he was tired of the crap with UFC officials behind the scenes. Diaz was content with waiting until he got a solid opponent and a good payday, which didn't happen until UFC 241 against former UFC lightweight champion Anthony Showtime Pettis. Diaz came ready to fight, and the veteran dominated Pettis and got the easy W overall. Following that bout, Diaz took it upon himself to call out one of the hottest fighters in the game, Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal accepted the fight, and the two main evented UFC 244 for the baddest man title. Surprisingly, Masvidal was a step ahead of Diaz, and the bout was stopped in the 3rd round due to doctors ruling Nate being unable to fight. The same could be said about his return bout against Leon Edwards, with Diaz getting dominated in the early portion of the bout before giving Edwards a good butt-kicking late in the 5th round. Diaz lost both bouts but gained respect from some fans due to his never-say-die attitude. So what's next for Nate Diaz? Only time will tell if the UFC star will step into the octagon anytime soon. One thing's for sure, you could expect a strong performance from one of Stockton's favorite fighters.